happens is it's just this void that you send out your resume and it just kind of goes out in the void, never really comes back. One of the things that I noticed is a lot of times your resume kind of, even when you know people, you send it out to the head of HR, it kind of goes into this void, and it never really comes back. And one thing that I noticed is your resume actually only has two purposes. And the very first purpose that your resume has is it's to get your foot in the door. And one of the things that happens is you put your resume and it goes to this head of HR, you either through Monster or whatever. It goes to this head of HR and they're looking at a stack of 1,000 resumes. And the first thing that they have to do is they have to weed out, who goes to the next phase. The next phase might only be 100 resumes. So think about like the turnover ratio on that. You go from 1,000 to 100. 10% is what's making it through the door. And they're only going to be spending seconds looking at your resume. So the very first thing that your resume has to do is it has to really kind of shine from a grammatic standpoint and from an aesthetic standpoint, because that's what the first thing that they're going to look at. Is it pretty enough? Because and does it have the general qualifications? Does it say a couple of the key words that we're looking for the job description? One of the first things that they're going to read is going to be that objective. If you don't have an objective that talks about, or a summary, or a personal summary for yourself that talks about anything remotely that resembles that job, immediately going to the 90% that gets thrown away. What you want to do is you want to create a resume that has that personal touch to it, that gets to that 10%. And that's only the first hurdle, is getting from that 1,000 to 100. Because once you get, once you get to that aesthetic standpoint, and that grammatical kind of issue standpoint, then you have to look at, the actual content. And then you have to start asking yourself a very difficult question. And it's one of the more difficult questions. Is this a job you really want? Now, a lot of times we send this resume out into the void and we're looking for any job, anybody that'll come back and talk to us. But at the same time, your resume has to fulfill that second purpose, which is it's going to be an outline to your interview. So first thing you have to do is you have to get your foot in the door, get to that stack of 100 resumes, and then you start having to ask yourself qualifying questions. Is this resume going to really show what I want to portray to the company, and is it going to show that I actually have interest in what this company does? Because if it doesn't show that interest in what that company does in the very first sentence, in all your job history, you're not going to get to that next phase. Because that next phase is going from that stack of 100 to a stack of 20, where you actually go past the HR director and out to the people that are actually going to use you, where they're going to whittle it down to maybe a handful of candidates from 6. So really just kind of think about the magnitude of that. You're starting off from 1,000, and then ultimately you're going down to a pack of about 6. And you're hoping to somehow whittle your way through. That's why sometimes it can feel like that's a void, sending your resume out to Career Builder and things like that. Because it is. When you kind of take that approach, anything you can do to get yourself to that top 6 is really what you need in order to kind of be successful in that interview process. Now the question is, how do you get yourself? Are there ways to jump past this stack of 1,000? Well, the very first thing, congratulations, you're all doing it right now. Going to networking events. This is a really great example of a networking event because you're out, you're talking, you're also, and the great thing about this is you're even showing some of your skill set. Because I know a lot of times one of the things that made it very beneficial for me was every time I could show that I was any sort of public speaking. I'm an engineer, so by nature, a lot of engineers are not really natural public speakers. So anytime you can show that you have that capability to be a public speaker as an engineer, they kind of latch on to that. It's a very remarkable skill in my industry. So you're doing that right now by even just participating. And then on top of that, when you go out and actively look, you want to then kind of show what sets you ahead. You want to make yourself as marketable as possible. And the second way to do that is kind of that second purpose of your resume, which is to show interest in the company. So how many people have ever interviewed the company as much as they were interviewing you? Got a couple hands on that. that is by far one of the most important things you can do, because if you think about it, a person's going to have several careers in their lifetime. You want to make sure that you're interviewing that company as much as they're interviewing you, because you're making as much of an investment in them as they are in you. And you really want to take advantage of that. One of the things that I find helps the most when I'm going into that interview process is, having a few questions up front. And actually, one of the best things you can do is actually talk about the interviewer's favorite subject, which is themselves. Anytime you can ask them a question about themselves and how they like the company, what their commitment is, how long they've been a part of the company, and what they like about the company, it gets them asking questions and thinking and really interviewing. It's you interviewing them, and their responses to how enthusiastic they are about their own company is really something that you want to, is what kind of takes you to that next step. And it also help you in terms of not just finding a job that you're just a warm seat in the chair, but you want to be that cog in the wheel that kind of gets you going, and you want to find a job that you're passionate about and something that you like and enjoy. And it's those answers to those questions that really kind of gets you to that next step. Thank you.